I'm Luke Kelly, and I'm the founder of the Line and Length movement, dedicated to ripping the covers off mental health stigma. After a rough spell with my mental health, I contacted a large number of mates to come together to play a game of cricket with a very unique point of difference. In between innings, a supportive platform was provided where those who felt comfortable showing some vulnerability openly spoke about their personal mental health journey. Thus, the Line and Length movement was born. While we are not mental health experts on this podcast, we are always here to support. So if you or anyone you know is feeling a bit flat, please have a talk to the experts like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or a medical professional. Today's episode is sponsored by Picker Financial Solutions. The support that Justin Picker is providing will go a long way in assisting the Line and Length movement in ripping the covers off mental health. While we here at Line and Length focus on mental health, Picker Financial Solutions can help you with your financial health. And now, on to this week's episode of This Is Your Line and Length.
G'day team, welcome to this episode of This Is Your Line and Length. I'm your host Aiden, joined here by Kels. How you doing, mate?
Good, mate. Good, Aiden. I'm going really well. Good to have Parker on the show.
We got this week's guest is Adam Parker. How are you, Parker?
Mate, I'm good. I'm excited to get in and have a good hard chat and discuss some serious topics around mental health.
Fantastic. It's great to have you on here, mate, and thanks for reaching out to us. Before we sort of started the podcast, you were telling us that you started up a soccer club out in Parks, where you're based.
Yeah, so I got back into the country because I'd been working overseas for quite a bit of time. And then, when I got back in 2019, my goal was to try and increase the quality of sport out in the country because it's slowly dwindling this day and age. Christ, when I was 18, there was 15, 16 men's teams out there, and now there's only 5, and it's not very good quality. No one trains, but we've got some really talented young kids coming through, but they haven't got that sort of next step. So when I got back, the goal was first of all, I needed a competition out there. So I helped to get back up the Western Premier League, which is throughout the Central West and expands up to 3 hours away. Helped in getting that back up and running. That hadn't been going for 10 years. So we got that back up and running for last year. And got the Parks Cobras, we call ourselves, the Purple Cobras, started as well. And we hadn't had a team since 1989, I think it was.
Yeah.
So 30 years. So most of the team hadn't even been born yet. I think I was the only one that had been born because I'm the old dog of the team. But it's exciting.
Parker, is sport a big thing out there in Parks?
Yes, I think because being from rural country town, only 10,000 people, there's nothing else to do except play sport. But what's scary is it is starting to die off just with technology and games on the computer and this and that and PlayStations. A lot of kids aren't getting as involved in sport this day and age, and volunteers, there's not as many volunteers helping to run sporting clubs. So it is starting to drop off a bit. But like I said, you've got those core little people, like the smaller groups that are still playing every single sport possible because there's nothing else to do out there.
Yeah.
And does that sort of, I know you're a teacher as well there, Parker. Does that reflect in sort of the stuff you're doing at school as well?
Yeah, 100%. So my background's high school PE teaching, and I started to identify that because my passion is just around being physically active and sport, playing games and all that. And I found that in the last decade, I've been out of uni for teaching. Kids are just not having those fundamental movement skills and the passion to want to get active anymore. So they're getting to high school with such a negative perception of getting involved because they don't have the coordination. And there's this whole concept around you're sweating, which means you're trying. It's sort of almost embarrassed to try now, which is a bit of a scare with this next generation. But I found that my job and my passion was going. So I ended up starting my own company with the goal to go out into primary schools, sort of reinvigorating, because the beauty about primary school kids are they're yes kids. So they're always a yes to every opportunity they have. So getting in and just teaching them those fundamental movement skills and getting them to enjoy physical activity rather than having it as a task, but it's excitement. Because in high school, they've come in with a negative perception, and no matter what game I try and throw at them, they're just not wanting to get engaged or involved, which is really upsetting.
Do you notice a difference between the kids that are generally more active within sort of PE versus the kids who aren't? Like, is there a mood difference? Is there an attitude difference between them?
I think that when we were at school, majority of kids would get involved, but then obviously your sporty ones would shine, and sort of you had your natural all-rounders in the class, and you usually had half a dozen of those, and they just dominate, and there was always competition. But even this day and age, even the sporty kids, they're not getting involved in PE. Because it's almost frowned upon to do that now. And it's such an upsetting thing coming from someone that lives and breathes sport and physical activity. And I'm all about the holistic approach to health, and you need physical activity to stimulate the mind and make you feel better. And these kids that on a weekend when they're playing their sport, they're dominating. And then it comes to school and you're doing games in PE and going, come on, mate, like jump in, you love sport. And they sort of just look at you like, are you kidding? No, because I care what my friends think. And if I try, I'm going to get bagged on, which is just so stupid.
Yeah, I'll back that up, Parker. Being a primary school teacher myself, I can safely say that in every class that I've taught, there are more kids that don't play sport than do. And I'm sure when we were all going through, it was the exact opposite. I guess it's really, really concerning. And you see that as a teacher and you think, geez, like you don't realize what you're missing out on. It's sports. It has given me so much in life, in terms of, the friendships you make and how it just makes you feel better. And you just think if these kids at this young age aren't engaging in that, it's really concerning.
100%. And I think there's a big push, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Kel, being in the primary industry, because I jump around a lot of primary schools now with my company. And the pressures most primary teachers face is there's such a demand for literacy and numeracy, because Australia are that bit behind with that at the moment, that they're not dedicating enough time to the PE component or the physical activity component. The laws state you've got to have, it's 150 minutes of physical activity, like planned physical activity a week, which equates to 30 minutes each day by a teacher. And what's scary is not many teachers are achieving that. Like because I run a professional development course on it, and Australian or New South Wales schools in particular receive a D- in terms of a grade for physically active kids at their school, which is just so upsetting. And that's obviously having an effect because they're getting to them primary school where they've got their experts in physical activity, aka the PE teachers, and it's too late. By the time they're 12 or 13, they've got a negative perception of it, and then we can't get them involved.
Yeah, you're right. Very concerning. It's definitely something that needs addressing for sure.
Yeah, and there's so many studies out there to show the benefits of physical activity around the mind, helping you to engage in class. But just so many people are, I don't know, they're just so negative towards it because they had negative experiences with physical activity or sport as a kid, and it's just upsetting.
Yeah. Parker, have you found like a way or a method that works to kind of change that perception of physical education or physical activity?
Yeah, so my biggest thing is game-based learning, and I'll preach it to anybody. Obviously, I love my sports, but I was a sporty kid growing up, and I love that competition and that drive. And we've got to be realistic that this next generation don't care that much about competition and there's a lot more fear around failure. So my biggest aspect is creating game-based learning. So not necessarily teaching a sport, but playing a game which will incorporate skills to one day maybe play a sport. So for best way to explain it is in an example. So let's say we're teaching cricket, for example. If you say cricket to some kids, they'll screw their nose up, and because they've had a negative perception of that, because maybe when they're at home, dad watches cricket on TV and it goes all day and it's boring in their eye. So you say cricket when you go into school, or you say netball and you get all these little boys go, oh, well, that's a girl's sport because that's how they've been taught or how they know it. I'll go in and go, oh, we're playing, let's call it Aiden ball or something. And they'll be like, oh, what's that? And it might be where they've got a tennis ball and they've got to catch up and throw it 5 times, and I'll shout ships one end, shores the other end. And as they're practicing their catching, if I shout ship, they've got to run to the other end and get back and find their ball that they've placed on the ground. And it's like musical chairs where I'll remove balls as they run. All of a sudden, you've created a game for them. They're learning how to they're learning how to toss the ball up and catch the ball, which is the first step in cricket, because that's what fielding is. And they're oblivious to learning those skills. And then all of a sudden, then maybe down the track, they go, hey, I'm good at catching. I want to do something that involves that. And then you go, okay, well, we're going to bring in a couple of bats now, and we're going to just hit the ball as far as we can. And it might be a race to do something. And you're just not highlighting the sport concept, but they're learning the skills. And I found that that's had the biggest impact in primary schools, because the kids are running around with a big smile on their face, and then the teachers look at it and go, oh, hey, actually, this does work. Like, instead of going, you don't have to teach cricket and whatnot. And I know the schools are really starting to try and change. So when they create their programs, it's like target games, net and wall games, striking and fielding. So there's no specific mention of what the sport is. It's as long as you're just teaching skills that will help with those aspects.
Parker, I can see, or I can tell now why you've started this exit games business just from that last 5 minutes. You are clearly passionate about this. That's so refreshing to hear. There is a genuine passion in that last statement. That's so good, mate.
Nah, thanks. And I guess I'm trying to give back to the kids what I see as sport. Like, that's how I felt around sport, and I still do to this day. But if I can try and direct that into just physical activity rather than the sports concept, maybe one day they'll play sport, maybe they won't, but they'll get the benefits out of that physical activity because they've got smiles on their face at the end. And that's when you can have that discussion, particularly with like the year sixes and that, like, how's everyone feeling? And they'll be happy and puffed. Oh, that was the best, blah, blah. And then I'll talk about how, well, there's an endorphin release in your brain, which makes you happy. So then that's more likely to keep you happy throughout the day. And just starting to speak about the mind with these young kids, because essentially, like, we don't even teach really proper psychology throughout any teaching, like even in high school. I know down in Victoria, they actually have psychology as a subject that you can pick for like year 11s and 12s, which I think's unreal, because they get to start looking at the brain and how it works, and what sort of chemical releases there are.
That's great.
Definitely something that needs a little bit more highlighting, especially sort of the younger groups and moving all through high school, is how to sort of manage stress and all about the sort of depression and anxiety and things like that. That, you know, it's okay to have those things. It's you know, unfortunately for some people, it's inevitable. It's the way that their brains are wired. But, you know, how can you live with those things and move forward with it to kind of in healthy ways? You highlighted the sort of gamifying education in sport, or education in physical movement for the primary school kids. What about for high school kids? Is there a way that's worked to kind of get them back and involved?
Yeah, so obviously I'll try with that game-based learning in the high school, but you're almost got to be a negotiator in high school. So no matter, or like bribery, it's ridiculous, but like you might have the like SLR, sport, lifestyle and recreations, an elective subject that kids can choose in year 9 and 10. So they're actively getting to choose what electives they want to do, and they'll choose that, but then won't get involved. And you're like, and you hear the teachers, they go through the same thing. You guys chose this. You need to get involved. Rah, rah, rah. But my biggest thing is, well, it's not just turning it back on the kids, but as a teacher, well, what can you do to engage them? What do they like? What are their interests? And it's linking them to their prior knowledge. So, for example, a big thing that's a craze, I've never played it, but Fortnite, like from the littlies to the oldies, Fortnite's this huge addiction for so many people. So like one of the games that I'll play is called Fortnite, and it involves like having like your soft dodgeballs, pool noodles that you cut in half that are your swords. They wear OzTag braids on their sides, which are their lives, their 2 lives. And essentially it's an attacking and defensive strategy game where kids are in teams of 3 or 4, and they run around and try and rip flag tags off. So they're already learning sort of components of your OzTag, but there's dodgeballs that they can pretend are grenades to throw and hit people, which lose a life, and the swords, they can hit people with them. And just doing that, all of a sudden you link to their prior knowledge of what they love, and all of a sudden they want to play it because it's a real life version of the game they play stupid amount of hours on at home outside of school hours. And then all of a sudden they might struggle in the game. They go, oh, I keep getting out. Okay, well, what do you think you can do? Maybe this is what you can do to not get your tags ripped off. So then you're teaching them strategies for OzTag. So then later on in that maybe that term, you might bring out OzTag or do a game similar to that, and they go, oh, I hate this game. oh no, but you loved this when we played Fortnite. You were so good at like evading and having people pull your tags off. It's the exact same thing, except you've got to carry a footy this time and try and get it to the other end. It's just having that, linking to what they already love.
With physical health being so important in sort of the mental health side of things, would you mind sharing a little about your own personal journey with mental health and sort of how physical health might have put you out of some trouble?
Yeah, so I guess grew up in a small country town, then left there, went to university. I wasn't the sort of brightest spark in the school. Like I didn't get an amazing UAI or ATAR, whatever it's called this day and age.
Yeah.
So going to uni, I was very sort of, I was quite stressed starting because I thought it was all over my head. Like I loved PE and I wanted to be a PE teacher and get active and whatnot, but just the demand, like when you go to uni, you don't have that help from that teacher and the lecturer's not sort of stepping you through your assessments and stuff like that. So that was very overwhelming. And then obviously the pressures of socially fitting in at the university because no one knew you and coming from a small country town and then all of a sudden being in an area where we went to a university where there's only 30,000 people in town, but still that's triple where I'm from. And you've got so many people aged, 18 to 25 in this one small vicinity and going out 3 nights a week and lack of sleep. And so I went from having good home cooked meals to good home cooked meals, maybe only going out once a week when I hit 18 to going out 3 times a week, eating whatever I had in the fridge, not having any money, and staying up late to do assessments because I was under the impression, I'll start my assessments at 10 p.m. at night because that way I'm not missing out on any fun with all my like dorm mates. So I'd hang out with them until 10, go in, start an assessment, work till 4 or 5 in the morning, and then sleep all the next day because you could always accidentally miss your lectures. And I found that was starting to take a toll on me more and more mentally. And I was just getting like worked up over just little things at university. It was just like, it might be that there was dishes not cleaned or what. And I just have that sort of anger and build up. And it's like, what am I doing? And it took me a moment to have a look at myself and go, okay, well, I need to compare. Well, I was in a better headspace when I was at home and I'm not now. So what do I need to do? And it's not until you identify what you need to change before you can get better. So I think the whole concept of, okay, well, I was exercising heaps and heaps back home. Like I was going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. I need to make sure I'm doing that here at university. Like you have so many hours free there. So making sure I got to the uni gym, you didn't have to pay for it as well, which obviously was a concern about money. So not going to a gym downtown where you had to pay. So making sure I got to the gym 3 or 4 times a week. And then making sure I was getting that 7.5 to 8 hours sleep a night. That's so important. And I think so many people, as they get older, particularly, they drop the hours to fit more in because they've got so many more demands in their daily duties. And they go, I can function on 5.5 hours. And it's like, yes, you might be able to function, but I feel like you're slow. Like that's just sort of creating a domino effect later on. And it's that whole concept of don't burn the candle at both ends. You're only having 5 hours sleep a night. Well, holy crap, in a couple of weeks, something's going to happen. Something's got to give. So I think, going through uni, it was making sure I was focusing on getting good night's sleep, planning better with my university, like with my exams and stuff and my assessment. So having planning of tackling it, like don't look at it as a massive task, but go, okay, well, my goal is to get this amount done in this period. Then I'm going to do a bit tomorrow. There's a uni bar night this night. So I won't be doing anything that day or the day after, but I'll make sure I do some the day after. And it was just having that plan. And because I'm a very organized person with lists and I'm a tick the list kind of bloke, creating that for me got my mental health really good in the university. And then that's when I could then start looking out to help others. And that's when I went down the path of becoming an RA and ended up doing resident advisor for 3 years. And you're there for pastoral care where you help the people in your dorm when they are struggling through stuff. And being in that position just really opened my eyes. But because I'd sort of, in my first year, I was struggling a bit, but I did this, and this, you could offer advice and just be that, I guess, support network for them and be their accountability partner, just checking in to make sure they're doing what they said they're going to do to get better.
Park, I'm just going to jump in there with being a residential advisor. What sort of training did they set you up with leading into that?
Yeah, so we had it's usually 2 weeks and it's pretty intense. It's your your 9 till 5 for 2 weeks, where they look at absolutely everything. So one thing in particular they did one year, which I thought was amazing, was it was like a 2.5 day mental health first aid.
Okay.
And I didn't know they existed, but oh my God, that just opened your eyes to so much, because you're like, oh yeah, I can talk to my mate and give them my 2 bobs worth and whatnot. But it wasn't until I did that course that you realize the severity of some of the mental health illnesses that are out there, and just going, oh, she'll be right, mate, and just let me know when you're feeling down. Like, sometimes there needs to be more than that, and it's not just putting it on them, but you yourself being accountable for it, and you physically going and checking in on them. And like, if they haven't come out of their room for a couple of days, like, not going, oh, well, he'll contact me when he's ready. And that's how my approach was sort of growing up. Or if someone's upset, they'll let you know, but it's not like, sometimes they withdraw. And doing that course, it was just like, oh my God. So that sort of gave us a lot of knowledge around dealing with sort of mental health in the dorm. And then other than that, it was just, just being a person that, I guess, if you had hard times, that it wasn't taking it out on your dorm and whatnot, and avenues that you'd have to go down to sort of get yourself in a good mental health headspace, I guess. Because my biggest belief is, like, you've got to, it sounds selfish, but you've got to help yourself first, because if you don't look after yourself, how are you supposed to help others?
That's right.
And that was one of the sort of things they pushed as well during RA training, which I thought was great.
Puck, another thing you said there was that you focus on your sleep, you prioritize your sleep. We've had Charlie Newton and James Lombardo on the show previously, and they have both said the exact same thing about getting the 8 hours sleep. Just want to know, what does getting good sleep look like for you? Like, do you have any routines or habits before going to bed, or do you have a set time, or what's that sort of look like for you? Because I know for me, I prioritize it as well, and I won't use screen time for like about 30 minutes before I go to bed. I'll dim the lights. I try and stay in a routine. What's it sort of look like for you?
Yeah, so I've sort of only just started to get really good at it probably the last, 3 or 4 years. But previously I used to be a really bad sleeper, like through high school and that, because I was a massive stress head. So I'd go to sleep and my head would be going 100 mile an hour. And I didn't know this stuff about meditation and I guess the whole phone concept. There was no iPhones when I was sort of going to bed in my high school days. So there was no issue with jumping on Facebook and all that sort of jazz on your phone. But like having a TV in my room, I was watching TV just before bed when I was in high school and that. And I was just getting really shit sleep, particularly if the next day was a big day, or you had an excursion or something, because there's excitement and all that jazz. My sleep was terrible. But I guess the more people are talking about mental health and how important sleep has been, like, that's become a big thing. Like, recently, it's made me look down pathways of, okay, well, what do I need to sleep well? And I found that having a to-do list through the day, like even if it's like my weekend, what I've got to do, it sounds dumb, but I have a note, like in the note section of your iPhone, I tick what's on my agenda. I write what's on my agenda for the day. So it might be, I've got to do a bit of work on the computer, and I've got to go to school, and I've got to do this, and then I'm going to the gym. And once I tick off all those accomplishments and I make it realistic for the day, I don't put down so much that I can't achieve it. So as long as I've got down and I've ticked off what I've been able to do for the day, that helps me to switch off for the night. So I'm not thinking when I go to bed. And then I do some meditation techniques if I am struggling to sleep. And one, I got it taught a while back, and it was just so basic, and it was just called the 4-7-8 technique. And it was breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 7 seconds, and release for 8 seconds. And all of a sudden, you're so focused on the counting, the 4, the 7, the 8. Within like a couple of minutes of that, your whole body's just instantly relaxed, because I guess it's you're sort of expiring more oxygen than you're bringing in. I don't know, and that sort of helps with your sleep. But I found that it worked an absolute treat. And I guess if you go back to olden days when they said, "Oh, count sheep when you go to bed," like counting sheep. Well, if you're focused on counting, you're not focused on everything else in the world. So it'll help you to get into sort of, I guess, that lull. And then a big thing I love about the iPhone is you can set times in it where it'll cut you off and start to dim the lights automatically. And so I have that set, and it shows you, you can set it so it tells you like if you're getting 8 hours or 7.5. So if I'm going to bed and all of a sudden it's say 10:30, I'll look at it and I'll go 10:30, and then it'll show you that when it gets to 8 hours, it'll be 6:30. So I've got to sleep till 6:30 in the morning. and I'll make sure that happens. So if I go to bed later, I will make sure that I try and get that 7.5 to 8 hours, because it's just so important.
Yeah.
On top of sleep, I think the importance of self-care is something that is kind of neglected and not really taught at all as well. You say you make your lists, you're physically active as well. Are there any other forms of self-care that you practice, Parker?
Yeah. So every morning when I wake up, I go for a walk before work. It's only a 30-minute walk. It's not very vigorous. Like, I don't get the heart rate up or anything. It's literally just a walk, and I listen to a podcast. Currently it's listening to the Line and Length one, which is beautiful.
Hey, good man.
That's it. And then, just some other ones like your Hamish and Andy podcasts and your Matty Johns one, because I like my footy and all that. And it's just that no-brainer. It's a positive way to start the day. And then, just walking sort of, I don't know, like I don't have anything to eat before I walk either. It's just straight up, headphones in, and go for that walk. And that sort of just sets my day right. I get back usually 3 to 4 times a week. I'll then, straight after that walk, I'll put in like 10 minutes of yoga, a bit of stretching. And I still can't touch my toes, and I'm not good at it. And like so many people are like, oh yeah, you got to get into yoga and blah, blah, blah. And my justification always used to be, but I'm so shit at flexibility, and I'm so this and I'm so that. But I decided you got to be a yes man with that stuff, because it's so good for your mind. And the better your body's functioning, the better you're going to be, the longer you can go in sport and whatnot. And that's obviously my passion. So I do that 10 minutes of sort of stretching and yoga of a morning. And like, I'm not really into that spiritual path or any of that. So sometimes I'm rolling the eyes when it's talking about namaste and all that sort of stuff. But just the stretching itself, that's helping me. And then I tick those 2 things off in the morning, and it gets me in such a positive headspace for the rest of the day.
What's your yoga routine sort of look like? So I do it as well. I try and do it maybe twice a week, and I just stream it off YouTube, something sort of different every time. What's it look like for you?
Yep. So I'm the exact same. You can find these like 30-day yoga challenges, and it's for 10 minutes of a morning. Because my biggest thing with yoga, just because I really don't like stretching, is to just do small bits. Like if I had to try and do a half hour, an hour, it'd be unrealistic for me, and I wouldn't enjoy it. So it's making sure I'm only doing enough that I feel like I'm going to get the benefits, but I won't lose interest in it. So these 30-day, 10-minute like 10-minute yoga, you don't know what you're getting each day. So it's the element of surprise. So you get up, and then I'll click the next day, and it's like, oh, we're focusing on opening the lower back. And you can always relate it to yourself. You're like, oh, actually, my lower back is a bit stiff. So I do it that way, rather than seeing what it's going to be for the whole week and going, oh, but I don't want to do this one, and I don't want to do that. It's the element of surprise. As soon as I get back, I click the next day, get down and do the 10 minutes. It's on the TV through YouTube. It's all free, and it's unreal. You do it for 30 days, it becomes a habit, and then you want to then start looking for other YouTubes to do. Yeah,
I agree.
How did you come about your sort of self-care routine? I mean, I struggled to get my self-care in check, and took a couple of nasty incidents that really made me focus on it. Was there an event that caused you to start focusing on it, or did you just read about it and you wanted to start practicing that?
I think growing up, so my background, my family, all sort of overweight, males on my father's side. The oldest has lived to 61. So that sort of put in perspective to me that obviously physical health and looking after yourself is a really big thing. And then hearing that there have been like down my like father's side, cousins, whatnot, there's been like a suicide here and there and that. So mental health has obviously been an issue there too. And so, I was a big believer. From the age of 15 or 16, I started sort of looking at my food, because food's such a big thing on how you feel. And I was a bigger lad through sort of junior years at school, and had a bit of bullying and that about my appearance and whatnot. And that's when I sort of looked at myself and went, okay, well, what am I doing? What am I eating? And that sort of motivated me to be like, no, I want to be the best version of myself. So at the age of 16, I started going on like morning runs before school, which is so rare for, I don't know, kids at that age to do, because they're usually sleeping until their mum sort of kicks them to get up. And then started taking note of what I was eating, and then started getting into the gym when I was 17. And all of a sudden, I just realized that I was just becoming so much more happy. And when I was sleeping, I was sleeping better. And I just felt so good about myself that I realized I need that in my life regularly if I want to be in a good headspace. So I'm really big on what I eat. And I'm also a believer of balance though. So like 5 and 2 for me, like Monday to Friday, I sort of watch, like, be careful with what I'm eating, eat healthy. Like, yes, if there's a dessert that pops up every now and then, I'm not going to be no, because it's all about having a little bit. But yeah, those 5 days, I'm like so in check and in routine with what I'm eating and what I'm doing, that gets me in a good headspace. Then when it comes to the weekend, you've got your sport, and then it might be have a few frothies with the lads that evening, and I don't feel that bad, like, and guilty that, oh no, like I'm putting all this bad stuff into my body and blah blah blah, because it's realistic. Like we need to indulge from time to time, and that does help with your self-care as well. Like you hear of these people that go on like 10 weeks without a chocolate bar or without cake or without alcohol, and all power to them. If that's what they need to do, that's good on them. But most of those people relapse because it's unrealistic. So I'm a big believer of, well, you have that bit of balance and make sure the good outweighs the bad and your happy days. So that's my big thing with self-care. Like, make sure I'm doing stuff good majority of the time with my nutrition, my stuff. And if I do with that, it's not that big a deal because I'm usually so active. Yeah, big believer of the 5, be good for 5, and then the 2, you can have that bit of an indulgent and go and have those beers or whatever it is with the boys, and then you don't feel as guilty at the end of the week. It comes to the Sunday blues. A lot of people get the Sunday blues coming around into work, but I don't get the Sunday blues because I'm excited to start my week because I've just had a really good week and I finished it off with having a few drinks or doing what I wanted on the weekend, and I'm in the positive mindset to start the next week.
Yeah, that's great.
Like something I've sort of heard of up in sort of the country is the increase in sort of I guess recreational drug use. Is that, you know, you started up this this soccer club, and you know, you've been a part of footy clubs and stuff up there as well. Is that something that you noticed?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a scare. So there's so many younger people now, starting to dabble in those recreational drugs. And I guess when we were growing up, the recreational drugs weren't as full on, and it'd only be sort of when there was, I don't know, like music festivals, people would be dabbling in that and whatnot. And like, I can't be one to sit, like, I've never tried it. I haven't even tried a cigarette before. Alcohol's the only thing I've tried, and I'm not going to turn my nose up to people that have tried recreational drugs and that, because there's a lot of people out there that are big believers of, oh, they try everything once, and if that's them, so be it. But it's just scary to see, like, there's so many 17, 18, like 19, 20-year-olds, they're all just going on these recreational drug binges of a weekend in small country towns, like when there's nothing going on at the pubs. And my biggest fear is, if they're doing that at this age now, what sort of a hit are they going to need when they go to these music festivals and whatnot, and how many do they need to do in it? I thought the scare would be if they lost a loved one around them or whatnot, which you hate to see. But yes, like suicide, people taking their lives between the ages of 17 and 24 out in the country, particularly out our way in the sort of the Parks Forbes area. It's really scary, and it's happening around like your weekends and early weeks, like Monday, Tuesday. And I don't want to go out and go, oh, they were drug users of a weekend and whatnot. But sometimes you just look at it and look at the crowds they're around, or like you've heard of them taking it before in the weeks before, and they do enjoy a party drug here and there. And I guess it's you can't stop these younger ones from doing the recreational drugs. We'd be naive to think that saying to them doing it's bad. And I lost a friend that took drugs and blah blah blah. They're still going to go out and experiment because they're at that age. But I guess it's working out a plan of attack for them to, I guess, to survive the weekend. As bad as that sounds, like they have their massive high from whatever they're taking, and then they have the lowest of lows for the next couple of days, and they don't know how to cope with that, and they think that that's going to be them forever. And I guess it's that depression that they're going through over those like couple of days after. They need to understand that it's a state of mind and not a trait of mind just from that drug. So I think it's like we're already educating them on what drugs do in like to the body and that through their PE at their high school, but clearly they're still going out and giving it a crack. So I guess it's getting around these lads, and obviously not saying no, but going, look, if you're going to, like, I can't say no, but if you're going to do it, at least check in with mates before you're going to take it. hang out with them for the next couple of days. If you are feeling low, you're not a burden to anyone. Give your mate a ring and just tell them what you're going through. Go and hang out with them. And I think it comes down to their friends as well, checking in on them regularly if they know their friends are dabbling or going to try whatever drug for the first time, or even if they're regular users. Because if they're regular users, that's even more scary, because it's just affecting the chemical makeup of the brain so much, and it's going to end up having some serious consequences.
Parker, what do you think is the reason for you more young people taking recreational drugs? Do you think it's, maybe a lack of education? Is it boredom in a small country town? Is it those people trying to escape reality just for a night or a day or 2 days? What do you think is the reasoning, or is it a mix of all of those things?
Yeah, I think everything you've said there, it's a mix of that, but it's also the ease of access to it now. Like with your technology and the ability to contact people now and whatnot, like the drugs are easier to get in, get out. Like if you're out with the lads on a weekend and you're 17 or 18, let's just flash back to that age. If we were out and had a party or something, like there wasn't as easy of access to contact and reach out to people through all these different, I guess, social media avenues and whatnot. Whereas now they might be underage drinking, or 17, 18 having drinks, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, we need that next hit. We need that next fix. Like we've had a few drinks, but why don't we try something else? And they can get it so quick now because it's everywhere. Whereas when we were younger, if someone was in that, I guess, that mindset after they've had a few drinks, it wasn't that easy to get. And I guess there was a lot of taboo around it. And I don't think there's as much taboo around it now with a lot of young people. Like when I was at school, even if people were smoking cigarettes, we'd look at them and go, oh, geez, they're a bit feral. Like we don't want to hang with them. But now it's almost seen as, well, if you're not, you're the outcast. And like weed's becoming a big thing now with the younger generations. And I don't think it helps that you've got America and all that having states where they're legalizing it, and there's Australia's trying to push for legalized marijuana for medicinal purposes and all that. And fair enough, down the medicinal pathways, yes, but how many people are protesting for the medicinal pathways opposed to the recreational use of the drugs is what I want to know.
Yeah, that's fair.
What have you also noticed? I mean, vaping is a big thing now. Is that also sort of apparent in high schools as well?
Yeah, so we catch a few vapors from time to time at the school. I think they just think it's the lesser of two evils. They want to do some sort of a rebellious trait, and smoking was that norm, but the new craze is the vaping, and they social acceptance that'll get them in if they've got their vape and whatnot. And it's easier to hide because there's not that smell of cigarettes, and because there's obviously not enough evidence out there to suggest how bad it is for you at the moment. That's their justification. Oh, it's not as bad as cigarettes. You'll hear some of these younger ones say, but I don't know. It's just ridiculous. I've never been down that pathway because it doesn't appeal to me. But it's scary that these young kids are trying it and then getting hooked on it, and then they then start doing it because they think it's cool, and then boom, the next thing you know, they're addicted to it, and then they're waiting for something bigger and better. So then they're going down the path of the heavier drugs, and like ice, crystal meth's a big thing out in the Central West around sort of Parks, Wellington, Dubbo, like communities. It's huge out that way. And just seeing some of these kids that you taught like 3 or 4 years ago, and now they're skinnier than a rake because they've gone down that path and maybe tried it once. But the scare is with that stuff, you can be addicted from it straight away. And I guess, like we educate them on it, but they're still doing it. And I have no idea. I don't know. Do you guys have suggestions what we can do with these younger fellas? Like,
I mean, I tend to think that maybe the reason that people are doing these like recreational drugs is to try and escape reality. Because I mean, I know previously when before I came out and said that I had depression and anxiety and all those things, I know that I would drink to sort of escape reality because I wasn't happy, and it was sort of like a mask. I tend to think that, like, whereas now I'm in a state where I get the exact same happiness from having 6 beers as what I do when I go for a run or do a really good mindfulness, or just I seem in my life, by focusing on mental health, I am happier now without the need for drinking and all those things. So I didn't realize that your life could be so enjoyable. All the little things in life are so enjoyable that you don't need to use substances. So I tend to think that people who aren't educated in terms of mental health and don't prioritize it are maybe not happy with where their life is at, and just trying to escape it for a bit. I mean, when I think I've mentioned this previously, that one thing that my psychologist said was, before you have a beer, ask yourself, why am I having this beer? So if you're having a beer at a wedding, or you're catching up with friends that you haven't seen in a while, that's completely fine. But if you're just drinking for the sake of drinking because you had a shit week at work, or you're not happy, or you had a fight with the missus or something, like, that's escaping reality, and that's a bad reason to have a drink. So I tend to think that maybe the drug use is similar to that people aren't happy with where their life is at, so they're just trying to escape reality. That's just a thought.
No, I like that. That's good.
I think another thing to come down to is just sort of to echo the drinking or recreational drug use to mask whatever's going on inside, is just the education around mental health, and making sure that people understand that it's okay to talk to each other about what's going on, and that ridiculing someone just because they're going through a hard time is not acceptable, and that you should be talking to everyone. You don't know what they're going through, and even just sitting and listening to someone while they tell you about, maybe they stubbed their toe and that's the worst thing they've had happen to them that week, but it's really gotten them down. That to them is a huge thing, when it might not be to you, but you should still listen to them with the same compassion that you would to someone who's going through something else. And I think that if that starts happening, it might open up other avenues to sort of, you don't need to have the party drugs. You can get that sort of, I guess, emotional high of sort of helping out your mates and doing things like that as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And you talking about the escape from reality, Kel. I guess as well, out in the country, like one of the main sort of jobs out there, like particularly out our way, is working in the mines. And let's be honest, working in the mines, they tend to sort of struggle with the looking after the individual's mental health and whatnot. I'd like to think it's getting better as the years go on, but these guys are going and doing 12-hour shifts, and they're doing 3 days on, like 3 days on in the day, and then they'll have a day off, then do 3 nights on. So they're stuffing their circadian rhythm, like their ability to sleep properly, which is going to take its toll. And then because they're doing those 12-hour shifts, they're underground, so they're not getting their vitamin D like from the sun. And then when they do get their days off, they go and party like no tomorrow, because they want that escape, because they haven't enjoyed their workplace for however long. And yes, it's good money, like that's all they keep telling you. Oh, but it's really good money, but at what cost? Like if it's taking away your self-care, and you're going down a bad path in that avenue, well, money's not going to be the answer for you.
Yeah, and adding on to, like, we're using mine as an example. Like if you're a FIFO, so fly in, fly out, like that. So then you've got the element of loneliness there as well, and away from your friends and your family. So it only gets worse. That just snowballs it.
Yeah, like I guess having the beauty of working a job that's like, or your stereotypical, your 9 to 5 job, you can still do stuff in the afternoon. You can still go and hang out with people. But these guys they might only work half the year. Like they work 6 months and have 6 months off, but in that 6 months of work, that's taking serious tolls on their mental health. And the only way they're relieving that is by going and drinking themselves stupid on their days off, or taking those recreational drugs to escape what their reality is for the current.
Yeah, and that also leads into burning the candle at both ends, Parker. Is that something that you wanna touch on there, burning the candle at both ends?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, even when they're in a good headspace, and a personal story of mine, this happened to me last year. So I was working overseas, and my goal was come back. I wanted to start this company, going in doing this game-based learning stuff through school. So obviously starting a company was going to be pretty full on. And then I guess as you're getting older too, you've got more responsibilities as well. If you're looking down the avenue of buying a house and relationships and just all that fun stuff as you get older, I think people don't realize that they're burning both ends of the candle, and there's going to be a stage where they're just going to have that breakdown, and it's I guess trying to prevent that. So doing stuff to having that self-care to stop you from getting to that stage. And I actually burnt the candle off both ends last year really bad. I was probably in it was probably March or April, so about this time last year. I had a friend that was going through a pretty heavy breakup, and he was struggling really, really hard. And when I say struggle, he was like, I was working alongside him, so he was talking to me at the workplace, and then straight after school he was coming and sort of hanging out with me for a couple of hours to talk. And obviously I was being that mate, I was there, I was listening, but I was slowly starting to take that all on. I'm usually good at sort of separating my emotions from other people's emotions when they're upset and whatnot. But this one just really started to take its toll, because I was losing time in the day to look after myself, because I really wanted to help my friend. And then on top of that, trying to get the company up and running during COVID, so that one obviously was a hurdle. And then also trying to teach as well, just to have an income, and then trying to stay fit and healthy, because the sporting season was just around the corner, because we could have been going at any stage with COVID. So I wasn't really getting that much sleep, and then trying to, I guess, being single out in the country too, and having that epiphany of I'm 32 years of age, I'm still single, all my friends around me are starting the families, the relationships, all that. It just all got too much. And I was at a friend's party one night, and I only had 1 or 2 drinks, and listening to my friends, who obviously was trying to escape the reality by drinking way too much because of this breakup. And then he started mentioning some pretty heavy stuff. And then another person was just being an absolute clown at the party. And it just started to really take on me. And I was like, I have to leave. I have to get out of here. And I ended up leaving and got home. And once I shut my door in my bedroom, I just broke down. I was bawling my eyes out. And I'm a bloke that does not cry. I've just never been that kind of bloke. And I know there's guys that do cry and whatnot, but I've just never been that person. So for me, it was a huge shock to the system. And that was sort of my breaking point. I was like, well, look what you've taken on. And in that moment, I identified that. And I guess it's knowing that when you are in a down spot, you don't need an answer straight away. Like, take it in and reflect on why you're at that stage. And I did. I sort of looked back, and while I was in that sort of emotional state, I looked back at what I'd been doing the last few months and gone, oh, you've taken on so much and doing so much that you've neglected yourself, and this is where you're at. So it was making sure, I had my good cry sort of by myself and all that. And then the next day when I woke up, I started to look at a plan. I'm like, okay, well, how am I going to get out of this rut? And the first thing was going and talking to a few people. So I had that chat with a few close friends, just like, I broke down last night. And I think it's because of everything that's going on. And I think people need to understand that sometimes when you're helping a friend that is going through a tough spot, don't forget to look after yourself in that instance, because sometimes you are going to take that on. And it's like, I think there's a couple of good videos that go around of people helping others, and there's darkness in the person that's struggling. And when you offer your hand out, you absorb some of that darkness. And if you're not sort of looking after that darkness in yourself, it's just going to keep growing. And that's then when, you burn that sort of candle at both ends and have that breakdown.
There's so many things to take out of that, Park. Like, the first thing is that, I mean, yes, you had the breakdown, which you've called it, but you said you identified what the problem was. So what did that sort of look like? Did you write down, or was it just in your head? How did you identify it?
Yeah, so that night, obviously, I wasn't in the right headspace to deal with it. And I think it's identifying that as well, when you're in the right headspace and when you're in the wrong headspace. And I wasn't in the right headspace to create a plan of attack right there and then. It was just going through that night, just getting through the night, like, have a glass of water, try and get some sleep. That was the focus. Then the next day it was, because like I said, I use notes on my phone all the time. I put in my notes, what have I been doing these last couple of months? For not myself, but for everything else. And it was all about, the business, getting fit for sport. Obviously, because I'm a little bit older, I've got to work that little bit harder. Teaching, helping friends out, doing everything behind the company. So even like you just, when you start your own company, there's just so many little things that you take for granted, and you've got to learn so many new things. There's just not enough hours in the day. So I was writing down everything that I was doing for the last few months. And then it was writing down the things that I enjoy. And then I wrote down the things that I enjoy. And okay, I need to focus on dedicating more of that into this life, because I can't just upend it. Like, I'm not going to shut down the company. I wanted it to flourish, and I can't just shut my mate out that's going through these tough battles. So what can I do? So I was looking at each different thing and going, how can I change it slightly to help me? So for example, with my friend, I did a big push for him and I was upfront and honest, went, mate, I don't think I'm qualified enough to be able to help you through this because it's taking its toll on me. So having that conversation with him was very difficult because I didn't want to think he was a burden to me, because that wasn't the case at all. So it was making sure that I had that conversation with him and then pointing him in the right direction. So I managed to get him on the mental health plan. So he went and saw the GP, and I talked about how it doesn't it's not going to cost an abundance of money. Get on the mental health care plan. And obviously straight away, being a male, he sort of screwed up his nose and, I don't know about that. No, mate, just try once. I'll help you get into it. I'll help you book in an appointment. So I booked him in for an appointment. So he went to the doctor. I checked in on him, went, have you gone to the doctor? Yes, I've got the plan. And then I said, when you have the conversation with him, come and have a chat to me and just tell me how it was. So then that sort of eased the amount of time I was having to take on that brunt of him going through these motions. And then, he was speaking to a professional. All of a sudden, his mindset started to change. And what was funny was some of the stuff he was getting told by the professional, he was hearing from all his mates. But it's hard to take advice from your mates sometimes. You need that external person and that professional that doesn't have, I guess, an invested interest in terms of they knew who the girlfriend was and all this and that. So he'd come back and go, they've told me this and they've told me that. And we sort of look and go, mate, we've been telling you that for the last 3 months, but it took a professional to tell him to then make him want his life to change. So doing that sort of freed up enough space and time for me that I could still get to the gym of an afternoon, do what I love, which is exercise before I go to bed. If I don't do exercise in the day, that makes me feel really sort of lethargic and guilty and whatnot. And it's something that I've always had. So Monday to Friday, I've always got to have at least some sort of exercise each day to sort of keep me in the motions.
Something else you said, Parker, was when you were identifying and reflecting, you came up with a plan, and you said you went and you spoke to your mates about it. So I imagine you've got a close social connection there in Parks. How did your mates sort of take that? So, and what do you think would have happened if you didn't vocalize that to your mates and just internalize it and kept it all to yourself?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest issue going up and even speaking to a couple, and because I've always been the fun, energetic, bubbly guy. I like to think that I'm rarely ever sad, because I'm a big believer of finding the positives in things. And if something does happen, look at the positive in it, or it's a lesson learned or whatnot. And there are some crap things that happen throughout life, but try and see the light, or identify that it's a bad situation, then get through it. So I've always been that person to all my friends. So all of a sudden, speaking to a couple of them, and it was speaking to my mates' girlfriends, I found was a lot easier than my mates at first. So just chatting to them, and because they were obviously at the party the night before when I sort of just went and left, because I usually stay at the party to all hours with everyone, have fun. And I just said, I went home and broke down, and it sort of was they were a bit taken back by it, because that's not me. But they were so supportive with it. And I guess, I look at that whole females are more nurturing than males, and I shouldn't look at it like that, but that was my way of opening up. And then once I chatted to them and realized, oh my God, that was actually good to get that out. Then I let a few of my mates know. And my housemate, who's one of my close friends, I ended up telling him and just went, mate, I broke down. And then he was really supportive of it and had a chat with me, and doing that and realizing that it's okay to show that sort of vulnerable side of you. Now, if I'm ever having a bit of troubles or whatnot, even if it's something so minute, like working with children or with staff or whatnot, instead of bottling it up, I'll just have a chat with my housemate, and we'll chat about our day. How was your day? What happened? And we'll highlight a couple of the negatives in the day, but then also we highlight the positives and the good in the day. And just getting that off your chest each day is it just makes you feel so much better.
Yeah.
I mean, a big thing that I took out of that sort of story, Parker, was the sort of counter transference that can happen, or the transference from when you were supporting your mate, you took that burden on yourself. Are there any other strategies aside from sort of, walking alongside your mate and being, I'm not a professional at this, let's try and get you help? What other strategies would you recommend if you know of any?
Yeah, I think it's making them accountable. So I ended up doing a psychology degree at university as well, and it sort of really intrigued me, looking at sort of how the stereotypical male thinks and how the female thinks, so to speak. And there's lots of theories around it. Obviously, it's not definitive, but it's the whole thing about if a man comes to you to chat about problem and whatnot, they're looking for a solution, whereas Oh, can you hear me still? Yeah, sweet. And then essentially when it's on the female perspective, they just want you to listen and sort of like not offer advice straight away, but just be that support network. So when he was coming to me with all this, he was looking for an answer, and I didn't have the answer. And I think that was really, really tough. So I think it's making them accountable and putting it back on them to help them and go, okay, well, why don't we come up with a solution together? It might not be now because they weren't in the right headspace, but giving them, I guess, a time where we could do that meant that there was a positive happening and that we were going to try and step towards it together. So when he was really, really upset that first time, instead of going, oh, I think you should do this, 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 and this. Well, no, they're not in the good headspace at that stage. And who am I to say what he should do? Like, he should have a say in what he should be like doing to make himself feel better. So it was like, okay, well, how about we check in tomorrow? We'll go to the gym, and then after the gym, we'll have a chat, and we'll try and work out a plan of what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks. And having that sort of set up as we went through was starting to help. So I think that's sort of a bit of advice I'd be giving to some people is, if you're dealing with one of the boys and they're coming to you with problems and that, don't give them an answer straight away, but say, well, why don't we come up with something together when you're in a good headspace? And when I say good headspace, I mean just not in that sort of upset phase right there and then, but leave it 24 hours. Then we'll come back in, check in, let's work out a plan together, whether it's something that you've got to do individually or it's something external that we've got to change to get you back on the mend, I guess, and highlighting that it's not a quick fix. You can't just go out and have a weekend away with the boys to solve all your problems. It's something that you've got to look at regularly and be accountable for it. Like, if you want to be in a better headspace, you need to have a plan, and someone's got to be checking in for that.
Yeah, that's really true. You need to have a plan. You need to identify what works for you, and a weekend away just with the boys getting on the piss is going to bring you back to square one once it all ends.
It's that whole Band-Aid solution.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
I mean, I also think it's the lack of follow-up. Like, going away with your mates is a great time, but you are talking about stuff with your mates on that weekend that, it's a bit heavy. Make sure you're checking up with each other. You can't just talk about it once and the problem's gone. You've got to continue on with that sort of follow-up. Like, it's the same as I think we had, who was it? Kels, you sort of spoke about it with your injury with your knee. You've got to continue to work on it. You can't just go to one physio session and then your hamstring's fixed if you've torn it. You've got to continue to work at it, and your brain's the same. The more you work at it, the stronger and more resilient you get, but the stronger and more resilient you can help make your mates as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly right. And I think a big thing with it as well is not comparing yourself to others and when they've been in a down and what they've done to get them better, because everyone's different. And the way I sort of explain this to other people is back to the sort of the muscles analogy, or let's say you're wanting to go to the gym to get muscular or whatnot. For some people, that's going to be easy. It might only take them a couple of weeks and they can already start to show some like signs of muscle. Whereas for some blokes, it might take them a month or extra dedication. It's the same with your brain. Like, some people might just need a couple of things and boom, they're back happy as Larry. But some people, they might have to put in more effort to keep that happiness. And that might be through their brain vitamins, which might be the equivalent of your depression medication and whatnot and that. But that's okay. And I guess people looking at that as a negative, well, no, it's a vitamin for your brain. It's like taking stuff for your body to make the rest of your body better. Well, it's to make your brain better.
Yeah.
Agreed. Now, Parker, you also, you touched on it a little bit earlier, you worked overseas at sort of school camps. What was that like? I mean, these kids are in what I imagine is a new environment. Were there moments there where sort of the training you had at RA really came in handy?
Yeah, so that job, so I ended up working in a sports camp in America for ended up six summers, and it was the most rewarding job I've ever been in. And I think because you have some of the biggest days there, and just you're so mentally exhausted working with kids for like 10 weeks straight, but also there's so many rewarding features to it as well. I ended up being a coach there for 3 years, and then moved into a director's role, and that's where then I sort of assisted and looked after the 30 coaches that worked underneath us from all over the world, age 21 to 30, and chatting to them. And I would always be checking in. That one beautiful thing about this job was, in my role, you had to check in with the coaches every day after every coaching session, and you chat to them and just go, okay, what was the highlight of your session? Okay, and what's something that you can work better at? And we do that, and just being accountable with them like that, it made them look at themselves as well, and they knew that we were there to support them. And I just loved that business model of what they were doing. We were essentially just there as, I guess, almost like life coaches as well, like to help them be in the best version of themselves, so then they can give the kids the best opportunity possible. And that's a big thing that I'm trying to bring back to Australia with even my business model. And that is constantly checking in with my staff, making sure they're okay, and giving them little tools to succeed when they are having challenging times. Like there's the power of yet. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's using the word yet to change yourself from a negative mindset to a positive mindset. So this day and age, you get so many kids that have got fear of failure, so they won't try, or they'll just say negative terms so often. It'll be like, I'm not good at soccer, I'm not playing. And just straight away you go, you're not good at soccer yet, but you will be if we can work on this. And just adding that yet to it just changes their mindset. So I would get them to start putting yet on the end of their sentences. And the but game I would play. And the but game, if someone said something negative, and we did this at camp all the time, if someone said something negative, they had to try and highlight a positive in that situation. So it might be, oh, it's raining outside, we're not going to be able to take the kids outside, this sucks. Then someone would shout out, but, and then I have to make a positive out of it. And it might be like, but we get to work on life skill games under the shelter, which means I get to know my camp kids more. And just trying to train that brain to look at like the positive to every situation just helps you, and it rewires the brain to always find the positive. Like it starts out as a joke, that game, because you're laughing and giggling as you're trying to work out positive to some pretty tough situations. And in the end, your brain just starts doing it subconsciously. And I'm trying to sort of impart that knowledge now to kids in the school when I'm in there, and to my staff as well.
I really like that, Parker, the yet and the but. I think that is fantastic, and that is something that I'm going to incorporate into my teaching. I really like that.
I certainly like that as one as well. I just like it as a sort of life attitude of the I'm not good at something yet, or like how can I turn something from a negative into a positive? So
yeah,
like that.
Yeah.
Now, Parker, you also touched on sort of the mining community. I've got a bunch of mates that are miners as well. All of them are also pretty big into gambling. It was something that you mentioned to us that you wanted to speak about on the podcast earlier. Gambling being pretty addictive. Is this something you've experienced? You're in sort of smaller mining town, so you're probably more directly affected by it. Give us your experiences with it.
Yeah, definitely. So it's the silent killer at the moment, and it's really scary because it's having such an effect on mental health. So I don't know if this is the same in the city and that, but you go out to the country pub of a weekend, like we'll finish soccer or whatnot, and you go out and you just look into the pokey room, and the age demographic that are in there, the majority are 18 to 24-year-olds on apprentice wages, and they're just feeding this money through. And the way they're looking at those machines, they're just so addicted to the pokies and the sounds and all that, it's ridiculous. And then if they're not in there, they're sitting around having a beer, but they're on their phone, and you think, oh yeah, they're talking to friends and whatnot, but they're on Sportsbet, then looking back up at the dogs or the horses in the middle of nowhere, betting on it, and just going through so much money. And I'm concerned at where it's going to take them. And I guess this day and age, like when our parents, for example, they were always very good at saving and whatnot because they were trying to buy a house and all this and that. But because it's so hard to buy a house in this market and whatnot, you have so many of them have this indisposable income, particularly out at the mines, that they've got this abundance of money. They're only paying a couple of $100 a week rent to be out in parks, but they're on six-figure salaries. So they're not being educated enough on how to save it. But then they've got that addictive trait when they're in the pub. So they're just feeding the money through the pokes or on their phone through Sportsbet, like through footy and any sport, I guess. It's just a massive scare. And I've seen one friend, like they ended up blowing like close to $40,000 just through gambling in a year. And we had no idea. Like we knew that the person had like to have a punt here and there, but we didn't know it was that bad. And just 40,000 gone. And I think because you're not physically handing over money anymore, like at the tab and that, it doesn't hurt you as much mentally at that initial stage, because it's just a number on your phone and it goes out and comes in and goes out. Whereas you're physically having to put money through things, it makes you sort of, I guess, slow down a little bit if you haven't got those addictive personalities.
Yeah, we've noticed just in this podcast that there are so many people that actually want to talk about gambling. Now, when me and Aiden started this, I guess we didn't really know what to expect. But I mean, we had Cam Bruce episode where his was coming out and admitting about his gambling addiction. Now we've got yourself now, but this week we're also recording Johnny's and Pickers, and they've both indicated to us that they want to talk about gambling as well. So we're sort of stumbling onto this, that shit, this is quite a big issue with what I would call my close network of friends. And I don't know what the answer is, but I mean, at least we're starting to talk about it, and I guess we can safely say we're all going to be here for each other to support it. Do you have, I guess, any advice or strategies or what we can do? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so like when I was 18, 19, just going out to the pubs, I wasn't a big drinker. So my justification was, I'm not spending $50 on drinks, so I'll put $50 into the pokies. And the whole concept was, well, it's not hurting me physically. So I'd chuck that 50 in the pokies every Friday and Saturday night. But then I look back at that time in my life and look at what sort of a ratio that was to what I was earning a week. And because I was only on trainee wages and that, it was a third of my pay a week was going into the pokies, which is absolutely absurd if you were to say that's what you were doing now. And people are doing that now. And it's just so scary. And I think you can't stop people from having that punt. Like, you'd be naive to think that if you tell them don't punt, like, they're still going to go and punt, and they can do it behind closed doors. But it's that whole concept of having a plan if you're going to do it. And to this day, like, I don't touch the pokies anymore, but it took until I was, I guess, went to uni and was flat broke that I didn't have any money for pokies, or going overseas where there's not really any pokies overseas. Like, you go around the pubs in America and that they only exist in their casinos over there. And you go to England, they've got a few fruity machines here and there, but they're not really as addictive or appealing as what the poker machine in Australia is. So it took me like having a few years completely dry without them to fully be over them and go, they're pointless. What the hell am I doing playing them? But particularly with sports betting, like on the phone. So I was living last year, one of my staff members was a professional punter. And when I say professional punter, as in the corporates, like your sports bet, your tab, all that jazz, he wasn't allowed to do a bet any bigger than like $15, $30 because they knew that he was making so much money off them that he was deemed a professional punter. And he would analyze data on horses like no tomorrow. I've never seen a bloke like so involved with it. And obviously there was an appeal to me because I like to have a punt every now and then. So I was betting sort of on what he was doing, and he'd only bet on the certain races once a week that he knew about. He wouldn't bet on any other races. And I said, how do you have self-control? Like, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm accountable for everything, and I write down every bet I ever do. And I'm like, what do you mean? So what he does is he's got his spreadsheet, and every time he puts a bet on, he'll put down how much he's put on and what his profit and loss margin is. So he's keeping accountable of it. And you speak to so many blokes and go, how much do you think you bet this year? And they go, oh, I don't want to know. They know it's bad, but the whole ignorance is bliss is what keeps them still gambling and having fun. And they might have one weekend where they profit $500. And once they win that 500, they then go and throw it back through, or they'll buy drinks for everyone. But if they were to know how much they'd spent in that month leading up to it, they might have just broken even, and that'll keep them in check to not go and blow that money. So one thing I do when I do have a punt, and I'm not huge on the punt, but I'll have a bit every now and then, have a go every now and then, is in my notes section, I just have, like, when I put a bet on, I'll just say, I'll put a bet, I'm at minus $10. And it didn't win, so it says minus 10 for the year in there. So then the next week when I put another $10, it'll go to minus 20. But then if I win $20, oh, hey, I'm back to zero. And keeping that in there now, that's what keeps me in check when I bet. So then when I go to have a bet, I'm not going to put a big bet on because I'm like, oh, geez, I'm down $250 for the whole year currently. I don't want to go too much further. Whereas if I didn't have that in there, I would have happily put that $50 or $100 bet on without even thinking.
Yeah. Yes. Do you think it's somewhat of a cultural thing like here in Australia? So I guess from a personal experience, I was in 4 punters clubs last year. They just accumulated over time. And my New Year's resolution was to quit them all. So obviously now I'm in 0. Do you sort of see that this whole gambling, I guess, addiction and problem in society, is it just a cultural thing? Is that where it stems from?
Yeah, I like 100%, mate. Like in Australia, that's just a thing, isn't it? It's going down to the pub and having some beers with the boys to like check in, catch up. But you have a syndicate and you chuck $50 in there and whatnot. And I guess, like for example, I'm in one punters club with a couple of friends, and if I wasn't in that punters club, we'd struggle to chat. We'd go 6 months without chatting to each other.
Yeah.
And it's scary that's just the Australian culture, particularly with young men, is to have that punters club and have that punt weekly. And all of a sudden, you've got yourself in 3 or 4 of them, and you might have your outgoings of $50 to $100 a week that you're sort of doing without even thinking. And then you might still go down to the pub and catch up with a couple of mates and chuck 20 or 30 in. And you look at that over sort of a month and a year, and it starts to rack up pretty quick. But the scary thing is no one's looking at that. They're ignoring how much that they're spending on it because they know that it makes them feel uncomfortable. And our brains are wired to try and ignore stuff like that makes us feel uncomfortable. So, like with my mates that we do the punters club with, we make sure it's just a set amount, and if you pick one leg each for the week, and if your leg loses, you chuck in $10 the next week. And we've had that going for a couple of years now, and then we just have the money piling up. So it's almost like a savings account in a weird way. If you're winning, or if you're losing, it's not. But we have that. But for one of the boys, that's the only gambling he does for the whole week, and that's his fix of being able to have a bit of excitement around the sport, but still check in with the lads. So I think it can be good as long as you've got control over it, and it's not an addictive thing. And that's checking in with your mates to make sure they're not doing it in 10 other punters clubs or whatnot.
Yeah. If you had a mate that was out of control, would you bring it up in a conversation, or do you sort of believe you can't help someone unless they want to help themselves in terms of gambling addiction?
Mate, I think after listening to when you were chatting to Ken Bruce in the last podcast, that whole concept of, and I've had that happen before as well, where they come up and go, "Oh, can you? I've banned myself of all the sporting bet apps." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome, mate." He goes, "Can you put a $50 bet on for me on this?"
Yeah.
And just having that no, like telling them no, like they'll look at you more as a friend for doing that. It might not be in that instance, and they might go to their next mate and try and put $50 on it, but they'll remember that moment, and you'll be the first one they come to when they are in that next rut, because they know that you stood strong by them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Puggy, you said that you had a mate who was a little bit sort of out of control with his gambling. Ham highlighted that for him, when he was on this is your line of length, that when he reached out to people, that was sort of the first stepping stone for him, particularly to his partner and his mum. Did your mate reach out to you? Was that something that you guys all stepped in with?
Well, this mate he went through a pretty rough trot about 10 years ago. Before he went to uni, he was gambling and lost a fair bit through that. And then he just went instant cold turkey. So he's really good at just going cold turkey and cuts everything off. But to me, that's a Band-Aid solution, because you haven't addressed what the actual issue was. Yes, you've gone cold turkey. Oh, I'm not gambling, but that next time in your life, then when you have a lapse or a moment of weakness, that addictive quality, you start it back up, and then you go ham at it. And that's what happened. Like something happened in his life last year, and then he went ham at the gambling, and was sort of, you started to see it. He didn't reach out to you, but when you're out with the boys and everyone else is having a punt from time to time, and everyone knows full well that he used to have a gambling problem, but I guess everyone looked at it as, oh no, but he's banned off all the sites, it's all fine. But what we weren't doing was properly checking in with him to go, hey, are you gambling again, or what are you doing? And then when he started gambling, he's giving you that reassurance. No, it's fine. I'm being sensible and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, then you see he starts hiding from you how much he won, or how much, like he was embarrassed to tell us how much he won, which that was the first trigger to go, holy crap, there's an issue here. Like he's embarrassed to tell us how much he's won, because he knows we're going to be upset with how much he's gambled. And it was just trying to highlight that, okay, mate, but you've had a good win, so just let's stop it now, and this and that. So he'd never reach out for I need help with this, I've got a problem. He'd look at it as, oh no, but I've had a win, and I just need to get to this much, and then that'll be it. And I just need to get to this much for the day. And he'd do that, and it was just scary, because then when we weren't around him through the week, blowing it all.
Yeah.
All right, Parker, I've got a question for you. If you had advice for yourself from, let's say, 10, 20 years ago, what advice would you give yourself?
Even 18, 19, but just before going to uni, I think the biggest advice would be don't stress over the small stuff and the stuff that's not in your control. It took me until like my mid to late 20s when I started properly going overseas and traveling to realize you can't control every situation, and there's no use stressing over the stuff that you have no control over. So little things like, oh, a plane's delayed, or you're going to miss your flight because this happened or whatnot, like getting worked up and getting really upset over that sort of stuff. Well, you can't control the situation, and how are you going to be able to think in that mindset to work out the next plan of attack if you're upset and angry and blah, blah, blah. So that, if I was to go back in time and chat to myself, it's stuff that's out of your control. Don't react to, don't get upset to, don't get angry for other people's stuff. Like the only thing you can control is your reaction to things.
Yeah.
So if anything ever happens, take a moment, take it in, and then give your response. It's the response versus react, which took mid 20s to identify. The difference between response and react is honestly 3 seconds. The first thing that wants to come out of your mouth is your reaction. You hold it for 3 seconds, you'll respond. And I try and part that sort of onto all these young ones now that have issues, run-ins with teachers, on the sporting fields, run-ins with the referees, like just whatever you want to say, hold it for 3 seconds. Just please hold it for 3 seconds, because you'll realize that that's not exactly what you want to see. That was just a reaction.
Yeah. And I guess, Parker, my final question for you is, what's this whole podcast experience taught you about yourself?
I think the biggest thing is that like everyone has tough days. Like it's unrealistic. Even the happiest bloke in the world has had some tough times. And like listening throughout this podcast, like to all the boys, like they've all shown when they've had some tough times in their life. But the beauty is there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and they've all come out of it because they've wanted to come out of it, and they've put in the right plan of attack. And I think people particularly listening like out to these podcasts as well, is identify, if you're in a tough spot, listen to some of these guys, because they've all come out the positive end, and everyone can, provided you're taking that self-care and checking in and looking after yourself and working out what works for you to make you mentally stable.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a really great place to sort of leave the podcast off. And Parker, thank you very much for coming on. Guys, if you want to be involved in This Your Line and Length podcast, please reach out to myself or Luke. We're happy to have you on, and we're happy to have a chat about absolutely anything. Are comfortable enough to share your story out to our wide sort of array, we're happy to share. But that's all from us this week, guys. Parker, once again, thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Loved it, Parker. Loved it.
This episode of This Is Your Line and Length was brought to you by Picker Financial Solutions. Picker Financial Solutions can help you with your financial well-being. This includes restructuring your finances, purchasing your first home, or purchasing an investment property. To reach out to Picker Financial Solutions, see the links in this episode's notes. If this podcast has made you realize that you or a friend would benefit from having a chat, please don't hesitate to reach out to experts like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or a medical professional. In the meantime, take care, look after your lid, and look forward to the next episode of This Is Your Line and Length.